I remember 2016, Barry Bonds was my hitting coach with the Marlins. He's another one of those guys that sees things that nobody else can see. And so he's telling me, hey, this guy, Chad Kuhl, he's throwing for the Pirates. We're in Pittsburgh. He's throwing that fastball in the outer half down. He's like, I know you're trying to get to the pull side. You're trying to lift something, but maybe think about lifting something on the outer half of the plate. And I'm like, yeah, but scouting report says he's going to run it in. But Bonds is like, look where he's at all day today. Down and away, down and away. And I'm like, okay, maybe think about getting the barrel out, down and away. Maybe drive something center, opposite field. Next at bat, first pitch, down and away, boom. Able to hit one left center, drive it out. Ichiro's on second base too, by the way. Ichiro come around, it's a home run. Ichiro daps me up, and I go back. Barry Bonds give me a hug, and I'm like, giving a hug. He's like, see, I told you, young fella, I told you. And so like, there's certain conversations that you have with these guys that like, you're so in the midst of the game that you may not see it the same way somebody else does.
St. Louis, Kansas City, like American League, National League, but in the minor league system, AA, AAA, pretty much up until those levels, you're playing St. Louis majority of the time. So AA, AAA, we know all about those guys. Kansas City, St. Louis, you play each other in the big leagues every year, that whole type of thing. So X and I go back from the playing days. Your career took you to Korea, came back to the big leagues, but doing a lot of stuff now, player media driven wise. And really in baseball, it's like, the first kind of wave of player-driven media, kind of catching up to football, catching up to baseball. So talk to us first about the playing career, man, because I have so much respect having gone through my struggles, man. But for guys to go to Korea, take your career over there and not even really struggling, just kind of opportunity, go to Korea, have success there, to come back. Like, that's a whole nother deal. That's a whole nother grind, man.
Yeah, I mean, you said it, grind. Like, that's when I think back on my career, and I mean, you guys are the same, right? Like, it was just, nothing came easy. So 7 years in the minor leagues before getting to the big leagues, opportunity with the Cardinals, the Marlins. But ultimately, it was like, I think I was 28 when I got the opportunity to go to Korea. And it was an opportunity for me to extend that ability to keep playing, but also make money. You know, I was tired of like, okay, up to the big leagues, down to AAA, up to the big. No, I'm like, I'm over this now.
Tough life.
And on families too.
Yeah. So like, and I had just gotten married, like literally a month into the off season before I chose to go to Korea. So now it's like, okay, it's not just me, it's a family that we're thinking about now. And so the opportunity for financial gain, the opportunity to say, okay, maybe I can extend this career longer than maybe just sitting in the minor leagues and going up and down. And then an opportunity for an experience, like experience a different culture. That to me was like, people keep talking about, hey, going and traveling changes your perspective on things. And I was like, okay, well, I keep hearing that. Let me see what that's really about. And so went to Korea, changed my life. My first son was born in Korea too. Wow. So like that perspective of having family born in Korea was amazing too.
But it just adding to the grind too.
Yeah, but it was just like, it changed my perspective into the idea of like, okay, it's less about trying to get to a certain place, because you know, playing in the minor leagues, like, I'm trying to get here. I'm trying to get here. That's all your career is about, instead of like just being happy where your feet are. And I got the opportunity to kind of enjoy that in Korea and made a lot of good family friends, had a good time playing out there. And it's obviously propelled my career into something after now too. So it's been cool.
Man.
How long were you there for?
I was there for 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you playing every day over there?
Playing every day over there.
Hitting homers for days.
Yeah.
It had to be so refreshing, like you said, man, because there's so much pressure. Like, we talked about opportunity, because Kansas City, St. Louis, two completely different opportunities. We're in AA, we're all trying to put up numbers. Kansas City wasn't a good team at the time, so if you put up numbers, there's a good chance you're getting called up to the big leagues. Right. St. Louis was loaded. And if you're a good catcher, you put up good numbers, you ain't playing in front of Yadi. You know what I'm talking about? So the opportunity, it's not always there, man. And it's so hard mentally for guys to stay locked in with just, hey man, this is where my feet are. This is where I need to be. So to me, like when guys go to Korea or go to Japan, go overseas, I feel like it's that refreshment of like, all right, man, I'm going to enjoy this process. And do you feel like so Sue was with Tampa, you know of them. So I'm sure you've seen a lot of guys that go through that, come back and have that.
It's interesting to hear guys when they do come back from playing overseas, whether it be in Japan or Korea, they talk about perspective as well. What I'm interested in talking about perspective is we talk a lot about clubhouse dynamics and chemistry and Latin players, American players and uniting and all that. What was that like overseas? Not even being able to speak the language and the culture in your family. How is that?
And it's the toughest language to try to learn. It's unbelievable.
Guys say they don't order food because they just couldn't do it. You know what I mean?
Well, that was, you get that shell shock immediately, right? When you go into a different place where they don't speak the same language. The thing about Korea, Japan, their alphabet is different characters. So you don't even know the difference. If you're walking down the street, is this a restaurant? Is this a doctor's office? What is this, a convenience store? I don't know. So there was that initial shell shock, but having this mindset of, and this was passed down to me from Eric Thames, who was over there playing the same team that I played for, multiple other guys that played over there. If you go in there, just your American ways, throw them out the window and just soak yourself into the relationship aspect of being with those guys. And I think that was something that opened my mind to say, okay, don't expect things to be a certain way. Don't expect them to be any way. Just go in there with an open mind. And to me, that made me comfortable. And that was the one thing that was like, okay, now I can have these conversations with these guys and build the relationships. And I went in there, same mindset as my wife. I was like, hey, if we're gonna do this, like, we gotta go in there willing to make like relationships. Like baseball is a priority, but the idea of really being part of the team was bigger to me. And so that means, hey, you making friends with the wives on the team, like that's gonna make you comfortable. So that was the focus. To answer your question, the dynamic was fine because we went in with this idea that, okay, it doesn't matter about the language. I'm not gonna make that be a barrier. I'm still gonna go in there with this idea that, hey, we're boys, like we're here for one thing. So it was fun for me to kind of build those relationships early on.
That's cool.
How were you received over there?
Amazing. And I think that was the main reason why, is because I was trying to knock down that barrier immediately. We had like Korean guys over to our house, like family dinners, all that stuff. They did the same thing. So immediately you could tell that there was an acceptance, but also like an idea that, hey, X wants to be a part of the culture. He's not trying to like put his ways on us, right? So that was the transition that I was fortunate to have.
And that's big respect to your wife too, man, because being an older player, having a family, there can be a lot of stress on your mind if she's not happy, if she's expressing to you or showing you that she's not happy, your kids are there. So that takes a family team effort, huh?
Yeah, and she was like more of the, when guys go over there, they become rock stars. Like she was like the rock star. Like everybody loved her. Like like Korean K-pop, like it was her. It was like really, she was the one that made me feel comfortable because I know she had her own thing going on. Yeah. So that to me was really made me feel like, okay, now I can just go play.
That's cool, man.
What was the biggest takeaway from Korean baseball versus American baseball for you?
I think it was just this idea of, well, for me personally, it was, okay, now I can just be myself. I don't have to think about trying to perform to get to a certain place. So for me, it was like, okay, there was a comfort there. But when I look at the league as a whole, it's like, guys are getting better. Like, and this goes for a lot of different leagues. You guys know that internationally is like, they're trying to catch up to us, and they're looking at American baseball, MLB, like we want to prove that we're good enough to be over there. And we've seen it with guys so much now. Like Ha-Sung Kim played against him. You played with them. Like the guys coming over, they're now performing at a high level. Jung-Hoo Lee just come over this year. Like these guys they're not coming over to be depth players. Like they're coming over to be superstars now.
Yeah,
it's
especially
different.
The Japanese player, whenever they would come, in my opinion, from Japan to the big leagues, it would take them a year or two to adjust to the velocity because they're not really seeing that in Japan. And now, I mean, you guys got starters. Japan's got starters throwing 101, 102, right side, left side. So those guys come over here now and they've seen the stuff.
They're ready.
So you're right. They're catching up. They are.
That kid at Stanford, Sasaki, I think his name is, lefty, Roku Sasaki. He's hitting bombs. He's the first one to come over before playing
college,
professionally or anything. So that's another massive step forward, internationally especially.
So now, kind of talking about doing your own thing, we had to have you on here and talk to you about what you got going on now, because like we said, it's the first wave for baseball of really players, the player-driven media.
Yeah.
You know, you're doing a lot of different things. You're getting to share your story as
everything.
well.
Bro, we were saying
That's
that.
fun.
We see you
Yes.
everywhere.
Yeah, and again, you had the breakdown the other day with the Apple, the iPad, and you're going through guys' swings, and it's so cool because people, my buddies, people, they want to know what are guys looking at in the dugout. So to be able to take fans, baseball people behind the scenes and show them that you're getting to promote the game and cover the game in many different ways, man. And the behind the scenes stuff is awesome. So we have a lot of questions about that. But one thing Sue and I were saying is, how do you maintain this balance of keeping the relationships with guys, but you were a player at one time, and then having that thought of like, okay, this is media, I got to be a little protected at some point in time. How do you feel about all that?
So I'm just trying to promote the players. That's like, as you guys know, like, if I can be in this media game and show the brightest parts about players, that I've done my job. Like, yes, we have to be truthful. We have to break down the good and the bad. But to me, I got into this because I'm looking at ESPN when I'm 10, 11, 12 years old, MLB Network, like whatever it is, outlets as far as baseball go, like I love the story aspect of it. And not just necessarily the journey, but also like, give me the story about your swing. Like, how did you even get to this point? Or how did you get to a certain stance? How did you get to a certain mindset? Like, everything with that has a story behind it. And I think if I can promote those stories and that path that that player took, to me, I've done my job. Like, I'm not there to beat down anybody. Like, nobody's there to really do that. I just want to know what's great about this guy on and off the field. And if I can bring that to light, then that's the biggest part that I can contribute to this media space. And that to me has been the encouraging thing, is like now seeing guys like you guys all doing that, right? But also talking about some serious subjects in which guys go through. And I think all that stuff is aligned in this media space. And we've never really had guys that have been able to sit down and have these conversations the way that probably most people want to. I even think about, like, we're starting to get into this steroid era stuff. Like, guys are opening up about that. Like, we never had guys doing that. So I think seeing that in a different light has been pretty cool for Major League Baseball and baseball in general.
That is really cool. It was we were talking about this, and I'll never forget, in, I don't know when it was, but when Hosmer was talking about the podcast and Moonball Media, and a question I asked is, why? What's the purpose? What do you hope to do? And you said the same thing. I want to tell the player's story. I want a place for players to feel safe to tell that story. That's why that resonated so much. There have been moments when we're in the food room, we're eating with players, and you hear an analyst who played the game for many years talking about, and maybe in some cases, maybe crushing a player. Yeah. And the players are, while they're eating, just right before BP or whatever, you'll hear a comment, wow, he forgot. He forgot how hard this game is. And my question to all of you is, how do you protect yourselves from forgetting how hard the game is? Having been there, done that, for a player to look and say, man, X forgot how hard this is, or Haas forgot, or Moilo forgot how hard this game is. How do you guys protect yourselves from that?
I'm sure it's the same for you guys. It's like, it's talking to the players. Like, I have to go on the field and talk to the players and listen to what they're going through. Like, that reminds me how hard the game is. And I feel like I'm one of those guys that it was always hard for me. Like, it was never easy.
Same.
So like, it's easy for me to kind of soak that in and remember that too. But I think the guys that forget are a lot of the ones that aren't having conversations every day on the field with these guys. Or, hey, let me call up Haas and ask him about what he saw last night from that guy, so I know what that struggle was like, or what Paul Skeens looks like when you're facing him. Like, those to me are the questions that allow me to say, okay, yeah, this game is still extremely tough, and I can't forget that.
I'm like you. My struggle was just to make a roster. And I think a lot of the opinions that you hear are based on the way the game was played when that particular person played it, as opposed to trying to deal with what's new about the game now. Everybody's more informed than everybody else. Everybody knows what you like to go to in certain counts. They've got it memorized. It's like you've got to mentally dive in so much more now to the game and then still perform physically when guys are all throwing 100 miles an hour and every athlete feels like they're stronger and better than we were.
Yeah, and the game ain't getting any easier.
No
I
chance.
mean, it's getting harder and harder. The pitches that these guys are coming up with, a splinker that at 98 miles an hour, you got
It's
guys
always been around. That is renamed it.
coming up at, I mean, straight fresh out of college, going to be a potential Cy Young this year. So I think that's one thing is always remembering that how hard this game is and how what these guys put into it. Like you're saying, the process, the routines, what they're going through. And this is why this has been so fun for me, because I've been interacting a lot with fans on X, and it's kind of going through, it's living the day-to-day season, like being a fan and walking through it with them. Right. So if fans are getting on their favorite player about, oh, why didn't this guy run that ball out? Or why didn't this guy die for this ball and do this? It's like, well, there's something deeper to this, man. Like, you got to understand, maybe this guy's playing hurt, or maybe, hey, this guy's going through something right now and he's just playing through an injury and he's actually doing something, a good service for his team. So it's fun to interact with the fans and share that, perspective, because as a player, you just can't, you had to keep your mouth shut all the time and just keep it moving. Right. You didn't want to cause any distractions. Yeah. And that's what I love now, because both you guys have, your analyst, you're doing your thing on TV, but then also behind the scenes, you're able to slow it down and really break it down. Because on TV, I'm sure it's boom, boom, and that's what you're saying about Atlanta. It's
exactly.
Pregame, boom.
Yeah, it's just so structured. You really, I mean, it's great time chatting with the players and talking to the players and elevating one team's players, but you're so locked in on that team, you never get to really expand the conversation like we do here. And I think this is why this platform, the reason why I jumped in so quickly was because I feel like, just like you, my story's so different than anybody who's ever played this game, I think. And I think people need to hear it, and I think everybody needs to hear as many different stories as there are out there, because when you travel, when you talk to different people, the perspective changes. When you have a beer with someone, and it doesn't matter what your view is on a certain subject, it changes because everybody relaxes and you get into general conversations.
We always talk about routine and how much you're switched, how much you're like routine doing TV and your schedule. How has that adapted over time? Because I'm sure you got it pretty good, pretty nailed down now. You've been doing it a couple of years.
No, I feel like, I think just kind of diving into the games like first thing in the morning is cool with me. Like, I love kind of just seeing what happened the night before. Did I miss something? Like, who had a great game? Who had a tough one? Like, who's trending toward the right way? I think in the morning is kind of where I try to soak in that information. And then I really kind of look at, what's something I can pick out about a player that is unique. I'm always looking for something unique. And like you mentioned it too, kind of like there's times where we have to be real and talk about someone's weakness. So if I know if I'm gonna have to talk about somebody's weakness, how many other things can I pull out as a strength or something unique about a certain player too? That's where I love kind of getting into it in the morning, and then, okay, whatever show is I'm going on, like I want to be able to apply everything that happened this morning, last night into that show.
Yeah.
And I think just continuing to learn about players. Like, I think that's something that we get fortunate. We're around players all the time. So like, if you think about our game, it's turning more into like players are numbers, just like numbers, not even personalities, right? Like everything is analytical. But if we can continue to make the game more personality, story based, what's special about a player, to me, that's what stands out about our game. And it could be monotonous because it's 162. But I think that's also what's special is like we go through these ups and downs and it's not always easy.
Yeah, and that's what I love about what you're doing and what we're doing as well, is because now I feel like to a degree, a lot of fans have become number driven, and that's one thing they really lean on, because there wasn't enough former players now like yourself or like us doing this and trying to share perspective and trying to bring something, a different perspective to them when they're watching the game. So it's awesome to see baseball really growing into that.
I'm actually curious about your story. How'd you get into media?
Yeah, no, I think, man, it's crazy because we were talking about Korea and going back to 2020. I don't know if you guys remember, there was no Major League Baseball. Yeah, ESPN was showing Korean games. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting at home. I had an Achilles injury. I had torn my Achilles in 2020. And I was kind of thinking about, okay, what's like next? Like, in case there is no baseball, what could be next? So I had started a podcast. I had started doing some camps with some kids. But ESPN started playing those games from Korea, and one of the producers reached out to me. It was like, hey, love to have you come on, talk about your experience in Korea, 5-10 minutes. Just let us know what it was like. And so I was like, okay, cool. So I went on one morning, was talking about it, talking about the baseball over there, talking about the guys that I still know. And after I was done, I was like, damn, that was kind of cool. Just like talking baseball for a little bit. And I
get adrenaline as well?
There was an adrenaline too, like talking about the game.
Yeah.
And I was like, I never felt that. And they always talk about like finding competition outside of baseball too, like finding something that gets that adrenaline going. And I remember hitting up the producer and I was like, hey, is there an opportunity for me to do that again? He's like, yeah, we would love to have you. Like, you want to come on at 4 a.m. in the morning? Because remember, the game's over there, 7 p.m., like on at 5 a.m., 4 a.m. over here. And so we're like, we'd love to have you as much as possible. And then I started doing it more and more. And I'm like, I like this a lot. And I noticed Eduardo Perez and Carl Ravitch and Sean be doing this from home. And I'm like, wait a minute, like these guys are talking about baseball from the crib? Like, like I can be with my family and talk about baseball. And so like started trying to pursue it a little bit more, and they gave me opportunity to do a Korean game first and loved it. And then they were like, hey, we would love for you to continue doing games if you want next year, college and maybe some major league games. And I was like, and they're like, it's only gonna be from home. I was like, that's cool. Like, I want to be from home talking about baseball. Yeah. And so that's kind of how I really got started, is doing games from home for ESPN, because we were in a time in which we didn't know what was going to happen. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's what kind of grew my passion, was like, I love talking about the game. I love giving my perspective of learning, like when I was on the bench, learning about guys' swing. I'm in the opposite dugout looking at what Haas is doing different. Like, why is his swing so smooth? What is that stands out? Like, I love talking about that stuff. So that's what kind of originally got me going.
And then from there, what happened? Then
from there, started doing more radio, and radio is where I really learned how to kind of, you going for 3 hours. Like, that's where you learn to feel that, have that conversation, communicate. That to me has really helped me in a major way. And then I was like, okay, I like the radio thing, but TV is kind of like where you get, to me, is where you get more of that adrenaline, and where you can, what can I find out that somebody else doesn't know? And how can I put that on TV? How can I build the story all together on somebody's swing? So that's where MLB Network reached out. They were doing a new show, Off Base, which I'm on now, 4 p.m. Eastern, small plug. Yes. But now it's more of that roundtable discussion, and I was like, I would love to be a part of something that's different on the network that you don't get to see all the time. And they brought me in for an audition, had a good time. They said, we want to have you on the show. And so been doing ESPN and MLB Network since 2020, and it's kind of been, and then I didn't have to think about going back and playing. I was like, okay, wait, this seems like the path that God is kind of taking me on. Let's be smart about going down this path. Baseball, okay, I think it's okay to transition now.
How about, so covering college, covering some of the combine stuff?
Yeah.
We have, learned so much about the youth side, the youth game, how much it's different from when we were coming up. I mean, we had a conversation with Travis Bazzana, the 1-1, Cleveland first overall pick, and talking hitting with this kid was like talking to a 10-year veteran, like literally leaving a hitter's meeting, and he's telling me what his plan is against this guy and how there's different clubs, and this guy's got riding his heater and doing this. So these kids are so advanced, and these kids are in high school throwing 99 miles an hour. But how different is the youth side, and how from being a dad with kids, has your perspective changed at all just by being around the youth game a little more?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, Bazzana is different. Like, that kid is different. And speaking of my kids, like, they got the chance to meet Travis Bazzana. Kentucky played Oregon State in the Super Regional. I was calling those games, got to see Bazzana firsthand. The kid is different. So shout out to him for doing his thing, 1-1. But to answer that question, I think you just notice that guys are really focused on doing certain things for numbers. And it's a great thing because obviously that's what scouts are looking for. So I know it's important to have the exit velo, the launch angle, you know, the right spin axis, all that on my stuff. And I noticed that they're really meticulous. The kids are meticulous about those numbers. And they're smart about the way that they train too. Like, it's not, let's get big, let's get bulky. It's like, no, let's train for every aspect of baseball. And that can be a great thing, right? The one thing I don't like is now you're just like focused on baseball most of the time because you could play multiple sports, but they're so meticulous about the way that they train.
Right.
And it opens my eyes to where, like, I got a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I'm like, dang it. This is
time, right?
This is gonna be wild going down this track of what you're seeing, right? But it's really cool because now you get guys that, like, when you're focused on baseball, like from the jump, like you were starting to see guys that you're talking about that have a different perspective on the game, and they're able to lead their teams in a different way, and just stuff that we wouldn't even be talking about at that age.
No, not even close. And then the workouts, like you're saying, the baseball specific workouts. I mean, big thing when we started working out is they're like, yo, when you bench, use dumbbells, don't use the barbell. And you thought you were getting an edge on somebody. Now these guys are doing band work with the heavy balls and all that. But that's a big topic. Is a lot of the youth parents are like, you know, like it's good to have your kid playing different sports, doing all that type of stuff. But what if my kid just loves baseball? And what if that is all they want to do? But it's still important to understand, like, that season can't be year round. You have to have a break. You have to train. You got to get ready. So that's always a fine balance. And that's stuff that I think about a lot more. My kid's only 2, my son. So that's like going to be a little bit of time before that all happens.
Is the word, right? Like,
but what do you do now? Like, when he comes home and he's like, Dad, all my teammates are doing this. I feel like I need to do this. Like, you don't want to be the one guy that's like, no, son, you ain't doing that.
But hopefully, then this for all of us, like, hopefully they receive the fact that we played, right? And they're like, okay, maybe your opinion weighs a little bit more than what everybody else is doing, right? Because we're going to have a better idea of what are the things that are actually going to help you get to where you want to be, or that next step. It may not even be Major League Baseball, but hey, mentally, physically, if you're doing this, I've seen it go the right way. So I think that's something that.
Which actually, that's what I was going to ask.
Jack's going to be like, Dad, you had a 53-degree launch angle. Shut up, Dad.
You can go back and see that. Luckily, I played before all that stuff came along, so I can tell him whatever I want.
So that's what I was going to say. Being parents of kids who are getting into sports, with all the conversations you all have had, with all of the people that you know, with the emergence of tech, what are you going to consider as parents if your kids are interested in sports growing up? What are you considering? What are the decisions that you need to make to help set them up for success based on all the information you know now, knowing that it's going to change in the future?
I think a lot of it for me, and this, I don't know for you guys, like, I'm looking at this nutrition stuff that I wasn't even really looking at when I was playing.
Go look at my headshots. I wasn't either.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at the training aspect that we were talking about, how guys are training now, the mental aspect of things. Like, I wasn't like as focused on what I could be doing mentally on a day-to-day basis to prepare myself. Those are some of the areas that I would put more of my concentration, more of my focus into for my kids now. The training, or the hitting, the pitching, the fielding, all that stuff is going to come. But I think there's areas in which you can have an advantage now in some of these other areas that we didn't necessarily put as much emphasis in, at least during the beginning of our careers.
Yeah, I mean, there's kids talking about, I'm eating this because I got off a plane yesterday and I don't want to have inflammation in my body, and like, that's stuff that, I mean, we had no idea about, you know what I mean? And but my thing is, with all the data and all the technology, and my view on it is, you know, guys always say adapt or die. Like, you need to be equipped. You need to know what this information is. You need to know how maybe this young player, that's how he communicates. So you need to be well equipped and know what this is about. You know what I mean? You can't be stuck in your old ways and be like, no, that data doesn't mean this, because a lot of the younger players towards my end of the end of my career, you know,
rely on it.
Cronenworth, we talked to him, and he was the first player that knew all that information, and I was able to pick his brain and be like, what does this mean? And he's like, well, how's this guy's, the fastball's moving at about 8 degrees horizontally, and I'm like, it's just fucking cutting, Jacob. It's just cutting.
Like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, and he's like, well, it's a lot of it's over 7 degrees, so that's classified as a cutter. You're right. And I'm like, but he completely taught me everything, bro, and he really did. And I'm like, okay, this is how these guys communicate. So I need to adapt and I need to learn this stuff.
I had no idea that hitters will set up their pre-game routine differently based on the pitcher that they're facing that day, the tee height, whatever their routine may be. I had no idea. Did you guys do that same thing when you were coming up, or was it just the same routine every day?
You started trying to tweak it towards the end and add it into your routine, because hitting coaches say now it's like hitting's like golf. Like, you need to have multiple clubs in your bag. So this guy's got a ride heater. So maybe you're going to take flips underhand because the ball's coming up and you got to be on top of the ball. Then you go to a guy that's got some cut or some sink, and it's like, hey man, fire that machine up and just run some cutters in there. And I need to like stay inside the ball and be a little flatter. You know what I mean? That's what the arsenal is right now. And I've seen guys to the T of the starter comes out of the game, they go down in the tunnel under, and they're working on that swing, they're working on that club right before an at-bat. It's gotten so advanced. And that's what you're shining the light on these players is what they do, their day-to-day process is incredible.
Right. And I think people forget that. Like, and I think as much as we can remind them of those things, and that's why I'm locked in on these numbers. And like, I built a relationship with Rap Soto because I'm trying to figure out from a number standpoint, a data standpoint, how can hitters start to catch back up to those pitchers? Like, what are some of the things the hitters aren't using Edgetronic? Like, what are some of the things that the hitters have to start doing now from a number standpoint, from a club standpoint? Where do I get my tools to be able to combat that? And I think you have to adapt, because otherwise other people are going to continue to have an advantage. So even from an analyst standpoint, I'm like, what do I need to know that hitters are doing now, pitchers are doing now, that I can use to talk about that maybe the audience doesn't quite know? And how do I communicate that in a way that's in its most simplistic form so people can understand it?
Have you found anything that can combat the obvious advantage that pitchers seem to have in today's game?
I think we can understand from a hitter standpoint a little bit more about spin axis. There's a way that we can attack the baseball that combat the way that the pitcher's using, whether it be a fastball that rises at the top of the zone with 3,000 RPMs. There's a way that we can attack the baseball better to be able to combat those types of things. And it takes a lot. Like, it takes a lot of the pitching machine in the cage. Now they have the ability to have, you know, the guy you're going to face, you can exactly see his RPMs in a pitching machine. Now, how do I combat that with my best club out of my bag?
Yeah.
And I think we can do a better job of hitters as that, because pitchers are going to be doing to their strengths as much as possible. Hitters, we have to combat. We can't always think about our strengths. We got to think about, okay, if he's going to this top of the zone as much as possible, how do I make that more of a strength than a weakness now? So I think that's one of the things.
It's
the trajectory
crazy.
is unbelievable, that machine.
Oh, yeah.
My first year seeing it was in Chicago during spring training, and they were testing it out. They had it in the back cage there. And, you know, spring training, we were there for 3-4 weeks, and it was, they had Mitch Keller on, and it was every single day. And I'm like, if we don't get 7 runs off Mitch Keller, something ain't right, because we've been preparing for this dude for a month and a half now, because that was the only pitcher.
Well, there's guys like, if I can give a Kansas City example, Seth Lugo. He's having like one of those Cy Young conversation years,
sure.
Yeah.
but he doesn't have high velocity. It's a curveball that most guys can't pick up because of the spin. And if we can see that in the batting cage as much as possible and train ourselves to, okay, this spin is different than everybody else's spin, okay, we can start to combat that a little bit more.
It's crazy to think that I actually had a career when I look at what's going on right now. Like, I watch someone on a nightly basis like Max Fried, 6 pitches, can dial in 3 of them at any time he wants to if he needs to go against a specific lineup. Like, I had 2 pitches. So I feel like as a hitter, how the hell are you supposed to prepare yourself for a guy that has 6 weapons?
It's a constant adjustment. Like you talked about with Lugo. Lugo's spinning a curveball harder than anybody, but he's throwing it at a velocity that's pretty 68, 69, 70, whatever it is. So you're seeing the spin as a hitter going like that, and you're wanting to go get that ball, but it's going slower than like what you're actually seeing. So the stuff that these pitchers are able to do now with the baseball it really is incredible. And that constant adjustment. So we talk about how hitters tunnel now. So if you're a north-south guy as a pitcher, you're a guy with a fastball that's got ride, and you're a guy with a changeup or a splitter, north-south. So what pitchers are understanding now is these hitters are tunneling. So anything from my belly button up, I'm going to swing because I think that's going to be a fastball. Anything below that, I'm out of hand, I'm going to try and take it because that's going to be a splitter in the dirt. And now you see pitchers with 2 strikes just painting low heaters. So they're just adjusting to that tunnel. And it's like, that's how quick this is all happening. And hitting has been behind pitching for a couple years now, but it's so cool to see the hitters are like yourself, like we're going to find an edge, and we're going to find a way to get on that level.
But I think another thing, and this was really good about your game, is the plate discipline has been more magnified, because you can't afford to give guys that throw 100 a chance to beat you outside of the zone. Like, you have to be locked into the zone now. And I think we're starting to see a separation of guys that have power, are disciplined in the zone, and now those guys have more of a chance than guys that are swinging anywhere outside the zone. Like Juan Soto will always be great in our game because he's so disciplined in the zone. And those guys will continue to be the best players in our game because they understand where they have to swing.
I have a naive question. So my time in the NFL, one thing that I noticed is after practice, a DB and a receiver would talk to each other and say, this is what I was doing here, and they would kind of coach each other up. When you play for another team, when you play against another team, you need to do this because the DB's thinking this. Offensive, defensive line, coaches on different side of the line, they're coaching each other. I was with a tennis player, and he was talking with an opponent, a match that they had 2 tournaments ago, and they were asking questions. Why did you decide to serve this way? And why did you choose this shot? They played against each other, but they were kind of giving each other their decision. It doesn't seem like, or maybe I'm wrong, is there a benefit to a pitcher and a hitter having conversations, or it doesn't matter if you know what pitch is coming, you're still going to have a hard time hitting it? Why is that difficult? It's not apples to apples in baseball. A pitcher and a hitter kind of teaching each other the mindset of your position might not necessarily help. Is that accurate to say? I don't know if it helps or not.
Everybody's so different.
Yeah.
I hear Freddie Freeman talk about hitting, and other people will hear him, and he'll come back into the dugout and he'll say, look for this, look for this, look for this. And the guys are going, I can't see what you see. Like, I just don't see what you see. So you can tell someone that something's coming, or you can tell them to look for this, and they just may not see it. It's a frustrating game. That's why it's so hard.
It is. And Freddie is an elite hitter. He's one of the better hitters of our generation. And a lot of guys don't see the ball like he does. You know, Freddie, like you said, his thing is, I want to swing at strikes. I should never take a strike in the zone. I should be able to put a barrel on it. That's my thing. Hitting has gotten so hard now that a lot of these pitchers, they're similar. They have similar arsenals, right? They, want to pound you in on the hands and then kind of freeze you going the other way. And then you kind of face them 4 or 5 times, a couple games. And then they kind of make the adjustment that, hey, I think they know what I'm trying to do. So then they kind of critique their game a little bit. So it's that chess match, right? And then it's like, hey, like Lugo, like this guy I've thrown him 6 curveballs and he hasn't came close to one of my curveballs. So I'm throwing nothing but that curveball until he can prove to me that is now something he's seeing well. So I'll start messing with my other stuff once you prove that. Pitchers are so advanced with numbers, with their eyes, with that, constant battle back and forth of the reps, that the big leagues, like, everyone knows your flaws and they're going to attack it right away.
There was one time I saw in the dugout, a veteran pitcher go up to a young hitter, and he goes, do you see what he's trying to do to you?
Yeah.
And he was like, no, what? He goes, he's doing this. And the hitter's like, oh, thank you. And he went up the next at bat, but he had so much respect for the veteran pitcher, and the veteran pitcher, and I sat next to the pitcher afterwards, I had a feeling he didn't pay attention to how the pitcher was pitching him, just the way he was in the box, and he looked really uncomfortable. He goes, I had to let him know, like, hey, just heads up for this. And the hitter looked, I don't know what he did, but he looked so much more comfortable. It came back, he's like, thank you. And so those little things.
We were facing the White Sox one year. This is my first or second year, so they're giving me nothing but breaking balls, dude, and I'm so frustrated. I'm like, why won't they give me a heater? Like, what's going on? So I'm holding on Przynski, I'm holding on AJ at first, and one of their players was up, and breaking ball in the dirt, 1-0, and he looks at me and he goes, "Oh, he's swinging no matter where this pitch is." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, he's swinging no matter where this pitch is." And I'm like, okay, so sure enough, another breaking ball in the dirt, and this dude just takes a gangster hack and like misses the ball by 4 feet. So I went back to dugout, I'm thinking, damn, maybe he thinks that about me. So I'm just gonna take the first couple pitches, take till I get a strike right here and just see what happens. Sure enough, 3 breaking balls in the dirt, boom, ball 4, and I'm like, oh, okay, okay. So that was a moment from a catcher on another team where I'm like, oh, I can kind of see how they think now, you know?
It's those conversations that you have to have. And I think the players that are most willing to have those conversations and kind of learn, because there's so many players now that are like, okay, I'm locked into what I'm doing, don't talk to me, or like they're so focused, right? But I think if you're open to having those conversations, it's only gonna help you. I remember 2016, Barry Bonds was my hitting coach with the Marlins. And he's another one of those guys that sees things that nobody else can see. And so he's telling me, hey, this guy, Chad Cool, he's throwing for the Pirates. We're in Pittsburgh. He's throwing that fastball in the outer half down. He's like, I know you're trying to get to the pull side. You're trying to lift something, but maybe think about lifting something on the outer half of the plate. And I'm like, yeah, but scouting report says he's going to run it in. But Bonds is like, look where he's at all day today, down and away, down and away. And I'm like, okay, maybe think about getting the barrel out, down and away, maybe drive something center, opposite field. Next at bat, first pitch, down and away, boom. Able to hit one left center, drive it out. Ichiro's on second base too, by the way. Ichiro come around, it's a home run. Ichiro daps me up, and I go back, Barry Bonds give me a hug, and I'm like, giving a hug, he's like, see, I told you, young fella, I told you. And so like, there's certain conversations that you have with these guys that like, you're so in the midst of the game that you may not see it the same way somebody else does. So it's a great point.
You ever face Barry?
I think if I had they would have maybe walked him without question. I mean, that's nightmare.
He made everything sound so easy. He's like, dude's throwing 97-mile-an-hour cutter. I mean, I remember Jairus Familia with the Mets had that nasty split. I don't know if you remember.
Maybe that was a splinker.
No, that's what it was. It was like ran in. It was like split. It was like one of the nastiest things I've ever seen. And he's like, yo, just lay off of that on the inner half. He's not throwing it for a strike. Just lay off of that. And I go up the next at bat, swing it all 3 that are all balls outside of the zone. He's like, what I tell you? And I was like, yeah, but it looks like a strike.
It looks so good out of hand, dude. Just sharing a clubhouse with Barry Bonds and Ichiro. You got to have a good Ichiro story. That guy's a legend.
Ichiro knew so much more English than people realize.
No kidding, man.
He was so, the cool thing about Ichiro is like, he was so routine based, even at age 40 with the Marlins, like going in, he had his own workout set. I don't know if you guys know, he had his own workout set that was from Japan, probably about as big as this room that we're in right here. It's his own designed equipment. And it was all in that, it was all like underneath the Marlins clubhouse.
I remember hearing Tom Brady reached out to him about that.
Yeah, he would work out before the games, get his hundreds of swings in, go into batting practice, and then on the field hitting bombs every swing. Like all he did was hit bombs, and in the game go the other way, like 3 line drives the other way. He had the most power that I've ever seen a 40-year-old have. But just like the routine aspect showed me that it doesn't matter at what age you're at, like the routine of what you're doing from a consistent basis is gonna be so important for your career. And like, that's why like guys are able to stay in this game, is because Freddie Freeman's another one that talks about my routine has been the same from day one. And I always felt like I had to change my routine. Like I need to do something different, but the answer is being able to do the same thing for a long period of time.
Just to touch on the strongest 40-year-old, I'm not sure if you caught the Savannah Bananas the other day.
I did.
Punchy tickets.
That was fun.
Hey, do you know that Ichiro, it seems like he still has that routine to this day. Like whenever you go to Seattle, you see him out there power shagging and throwing a flat ground and swinging.
Yadi was the same way. Like you see Yadi in the clubhouse at like 10 a.m., just locking in on somebody that's base running his first movement, like a base runner's first movement.
Incredible. And
I'm like, man, it's the reason why he's a Hall of Famer, right? It's the details. So it's like, as a young player, those things were cool to see because it always reminded me that you could be doing so much more.
Those Cardinals teams back in the day were so much smarter than I was, obviously. But I mean, they would double steal on me all the time. They would do things so differently. I saw a stat the other day that Yadi caught more games than Posey and Mauer combined. Did you know that?
I did not. That's crazy. If you would have asked me that, I would not have thought that was the case.
2 Hall of Famers.
Yeah, the
Unreal.
attention that Yadi would bring to like a hitter's meeting, and every coach just being full panicked and just being like, if this guy has the baseball, put both feet on a base.
Right.
Do not, like, have your eyes on him at all time and be on the base. Like, he was, what made Yadi so good, and I'm sure you can speak on this, was like that next level stuff, that noticing this little twitch and this guy's gonna go, or doing this stuff. Like, he had the talent and then he had the vision to notice, all right, something's different here, and he picks up on that stuff.
Real. Well, I remember being at first base and he's like, right before the pitch, telling me to move a certain way at first base. Like, he's telling the infielders where to move because he knows how a guy's swing is gonna play on a certain pitch. And I remember the first time, like, I wasn't even paying attention. He came back in the dugout. He's like, "Yo, you see, I'm trying to tell you where to go." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "I'm trying to tell you where to move right before the pitch." I was like, "You talking to me, like, at first base?" And he's like, "Yeah, keep an eye out." So next at bat, he's like, "Yo, X," and he's like moving his glove a little bit, telling me to go to the pool side, close to foul line. Ball pulled right down the foul line. I make the play, toss over to the pitcher. And I'm like, damn, that's one of the reasons why the guy has had an edge for his whole career.
Yeah, you see it in the whole field. Let me ask you this one, man. There's a couple guys in the minor leagues on the bus rides that have reached out and said they're listening and they're watching this and stuff. So what advice would you give them if we talk about opportunity? And there's a lot of guys in minor league baseball that feel like they're not having the opportunity that they deserve. So if guys are kind of contemplating, you know, if I have the opportunity to take my game overseas, should I jump on this? Like, where was your mindset during that whole decision process?
I think a lot of it was like being honest with myself. Like, okay, if I am in the big leagues, what does my opportunity look like? Is it going to be short-lived? Is it going to be to where I'm just filling in? Am I going to have an opportunity to play for a while at the big league level? And I was like, you know, it doesn't seem like that. So I would tell that player, and players have reached out to me too. That's the same thing. It's like, I would tell you to be honest with yourself first. Does it look like you have an opportunity to have an extended career at the major league level? If not, what's your priorities with your family financially? Do you have an opportunity to go overseas and make money? Do you have kids? Like, because that's going to be a huge factor on whether or not you want to go over or not. And then also just the idea of, are you ready for a cultural experience in a different area? Like, being honest with yourself is whether or not you could go to Korea, go to Japan, and find yourself comfortable there, or find yourself willing to be open to learn how to play baseball there. I think those are some of the questions that I would start with. But you have to be brutally honest with yourself. And a lot of times, we know as men with our egos, it's tough to be honest with ourselves at times.
It's also important to know that there's a lot of guys that see that as the end of their career.
Yeah.
But I think lately we've seen a lot of guys that have gone over there and it's just accelerated them as hitters or pitchers, and they've been able to come back and play in the big leagues too. So it's not the end of your career if you have to go over there, for sure.
Yeah, and I wanted you to speak on that as well, because you know all about that, man. I remember how excited you used to be in 2016 when your daughter would come from Australia and visit for a month. So having to leave home, be so far away.
Yeah.
I remember going on the West Coast, and my family was in Florida, and we would come in from batting practice. The games would be, the Yankee game would be in the 7th, 8th inning, pitch black. And I felt like I was so separated from my family. So I couldn't imagine how far and what you had to go through, and just the mental toll that takes on you.
It did, obviously. And we've talked so often about mindset and how I wish I had the perspective that I have now throughout my career. But I've learned that as long as you are present with the time you have with your girls, you travel. I notice you bring your family a lot of places with you as well.
Yeah.
I try to do that now as much as I possibly can. It's trying to get them involved as much as we can. But the separation from Australia and the US is obviously massive. And having my daughter come and live with me last year for 3 months was incredible. So we've worked really hard on making sure the time we do have together is just so special.
What I love about pro sports, when you guys were on the field playing, there's always a goal. The goal, win the World Series, and then you have your individual goals as well. Now, when you're in media, you're in this career. What are you pursuing now?
Yeah, I think just kind of being an example of, being uplifting for the players. I think that's my main goal. And really, from a media standpoint, I want to be better than everybody else. Like, I want to, if you looking at who the, YouTube people, when you're looking at the competition aspect of things as a player, you don't lose that. So it's like, okay, what can I do that, and I mentioned this earlier, what can I do that brings out something that somebody may not see? You know, I want somebody, when they look at who are the best in the media space for analysts, broadcasters, for baseball and sports in general, I want them to be like, yo, X is pretty good. He's up there. So that, to me, that's a goal. That's something that drives me. And I want to continue to be one of the best in our sport and represent our sport the right way too.
Yeah, man, you are doing a great job. I'm sorry, Sue, but because I follow your stuff, man. Your stuff is great. And it's got to be satisfying too, man, because this is probably a couple weeks ago, a month ago, but you're at the beach with your family. Then like, all right, kids are going to the pool, wifey's going to the beach with them, we're doing this thing, I'm going to cover a game. So
yeah,
how has that, like that dedication you have to it, man? Like you're on vacation, you're waking up early, you're covering the game, you're having family time, you're going to cover the game at night. How's that been? That's been different than playing days.
But to me, there's no other thing I would rather be doing than talking about sports and still spending time with the fam. Like when you ask kind of priority wise, like what do I want to be doing, is family, talking sports, like making sure that they're seeing the work that I'm putting in too, and that they're living it. Just like Peter was talking about, taking them there, you know, like being able to have them have those experiences as well. Like to me, these experiences are nothing without the fam, right? So like, I want them to see that, and I want them to love the game that I love too. Like love sports in general, but love being able to communicate and see we have these conversations, we're having fun with it. Like somebody's paying me to talk about baseball. And I was like, never would have thought about that was like possible, but it's like the dopest thing ever.
That's so true. What's hard about professions outside of sport, knowledge workers or media, sometimes it's hard to, you say you want to be the best, you want to be known as one of the best. Sometimes there's certain tools that lead to that. In baseball, we talk about the hitting for power, like all the 5 tools, 6 tools of mind. What are those elements in media? What are the tools? Because you can practice those in baseball. What are the tools in your new professions, and how do you practice those to get better at them to become the best?
Yeah, I think for me, it's maximizing your time. Like, and when I say maximizing your time, it's how much information can I get in a small amount of time that gives me an edge over somebody else. So the articles that somebody else is not gonna read, I'm gonna read those. Like I know, to me, reading is a really important thing for me. And I know that's where I get a lot of that information. We were talking about talking with players. That's where a lot of guys are not doing their homework, is going to players and talking to them about certain things. That's a part of my tool bag, right? Like being able to use that aspect, because there's a lot of people in the media space that can talk a lot, but have never actually had those conversations with guys. Like the one thing we hear all the time is my source said this or what. No, I want to be the source.
Someone close to the source.
Yeah, I want to be the source. And that's the advantage that we have being close to the players, you know? So I think like those, and I even look at your own space too, like the idea that you've had these conversations with players. So when you're going and talking with somebody that needs help, this has worked for so-and-so, this hasn't worked for so-and-so. Like those are the conversations that I love to have.
And for me, I mean, the only tool I have is my accent. So I play that as much as I can.
Everyone always has unique ways, or how they got called up, or that phone call back home, or something along those lines. So we love to hear your story, man. I'm sure it was a good one.
I was facing the Omaha Storm Chasers.
Stirred up, baby. Stirred up.
And we were in the playoff. It was the first playoff game in AAA. I was on the Memphis Redbirds. I had one of the worst games of my season, 2014. 0 for 4, maybe 3 strikeouts. I'm sitting at the locker, like one of those ones where you sitting there like, man, should I still be doing this?
Contemplating.
like, should I still be doing this? Because it was 6 years in the minor leagues already. So I'm like, should I really still be doing this? And I remember one of the club, he's like, hey, manager wants to see you. And I'm like, oh, shit. He's going to tell me how much I'm still swinging at that slider in the dirt. So I go in there, and the farm director's in there, and Pop Warner, who's now third base coach for the Cardinals. was my manager at the time. He's like looking at the farm director, and farm director was looking at him. He's like, you tell him. Like, are you gonna tell him? You gonna tell him? I'm like, what the hell's going on? And like, X, you're going to Milwaukee tomorrow. And I was like, going to Milwaukee? I got traded or something? And like, and then they register like, oh shoot, I'm going for the St. Louis Cardinals? Like, let's go. And so I remember like going back into the locker room and everybody's like happy for me, dapping me up. And I remember calling my dad, was the first person I called. And I was like, Pops, like all the work that we done put in, it's real now. I'm going to Milwaukee tomorrow and I'll be in the lineup. And he was like, I remember hearing almost that crack in his voice. And this is a guy that like, I'd never seen him cry ever. And just hearing that crack was like, okay, it took me back, and I know it's probably the same for you guys, like took me back to every single moment, like when I was 5 and he's back there like putting the ball on the tee or throwing a little wiffle ball. Took me back to every single one of those moments. And then once I got to Milwaukee and Matheny being like, hey, X, like, let's go. And that was all I needed to hear, man. I could have stopped right there.
Might be on the other end of that phone call one day, buddy. Ooh, that'd be cool, huh?
Oh, definitely.
Oh, man. That's
cool.
such good stuff, man. I love it, too, how, like you're saying, like your kids get to experience all this stuff with you. That's priceless, man. Being on the field or an all-star game, doing that stuff.
I know. It can be a lot sometimes, you guys know, but it's like, I'm going to look back and be like, man, I wish they were there, right?
Yep.
Like,